Sophia Marchetti had been gone for nearly 6 months, ever since the morning of her wedding, when she had quietly slipped out a side door of her family's estate, leaving behind an elaborate wedding dress and a life she had never truly chosen for herself. She had traveled far from the city, eventually settling in a quiet coastal town where nobody recognized her name or understood the complicated, dangerous world she had left behind. She had taken a simple job at a small seaside cafe, using a different name and keeping mostly to herself, cherishing the quiet, uncomplicated life she had built for herself, far from the pressures and dangers of her family's world. She rarely allowed herself to think about Damien Cross, the man she had been arranged to marry, though guilt occasionally crept into her thoughts about the sudden, dramatic way she had left. Damien, meanwhile, had spent the past 6 months searching relentlessly for Sophia, though not out of anger or wounded pride, as many had assumed. He had genuinely wanted to understand why she had fled so suddenly, sensing there was more behind her disappearance than simple reluctance toward their arranged marriage. Finally, after months of careful, patient searching, one of Damien's trusted associates identified Sophia's location, working quietly at a small cafe in a coastal town several hours from the city. Damien arrived personally, determined to understand clearly the reasons behind her sudden departure before deciding how best to proceed. He found her exactly where his associate had indicated, working efficiently behind the counter of a small, charming cafe overlooking the ocean. She looked different somehow, more relaxed and genuinely at ease than he remembered from their brief, formal meetings before their planned wedding. Damien watched quietly from a distance for several minutes, observing her interact warmly with customers, genuine happiness evident clearly in her expression, something he hadn't witnessed during their previous, more formal encounters. Finally, gathering his resolve, he approached the counter directly. Sophia glanced up, her expression freezing instantly in shock and fear as she recognized him standing before her. "Damien," she whispered, disbelief and anxiety evident clearly in her voice. "Sophia," he replied calmly, though his own expression revealed genuine relief at finally locating her safely. "I've been searching for you." Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she quickly untied her apron, glancing nervously around the cafe. "Please," she said quietly, "can we talk somewhere private?" Damien nodded understandingly, following her outside to a quiet bench overlooking the ocean. They sat together in tense silence for several moments before Sophia finally spoke. "I'm sorry for leaving the way I did," she said softly, guilt evident clearly in her tone. "It wasn't fair to you, disappearing without explanation." Damien studied her carefully, curiosity and genuine concern evident in his expression. "I'm not here to force you back, Sophia," he said gently. "I only want to understand why you felt you had to leave so suddenly." Sophia hesitated, clearly uncomfortable discussing her reasons openly. "It's complicated," she said quietly, glancing away toward the ocean. "I just couldn't go through with a life I never chose. Surrounded by danger and violence I've spent years trying to escape." As she spoke, she reached instinctively to push back a loose strand of hair, the sleeve of her shirt sliding back slightly to reveal a jagged, faded scar along her forearm, quickly hidden again as she noticed Damien's gaze shift toward it. Damien's expression shifted instantly, genuine concern and curiosity evident clearly in his gaze. "Sophia," he said gently, "what happened there?" Sophia quickly pulled her sleeve back down, clear discomfort evident in her expression. "It's nothing," she said quickly, though her voice betrayed clear tension. "Just an old accident." Damien studied her carefully, sensing clearly there was significant pain behind her brief, dismissive explanation. "It doesn't seem like nothing," he said softly, genuine concern evident in his tone. "Please, Sophia, whatever happened, you can trust me." Sophia hesitated, clearly torn between her instinct toward secrecy and her exhaustion from carrying this painful memory alone for so long. She studied Damien carefully, searching his expression for any sign of judgment or insincerity, finding instead genuine warmth and patience. It's connected to why I was so afraid of your world, she finally admitted quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Something happened years ago, something that changed everything for me. Damien remained silent, patiently waiting for her to continue. Genuine empathy and concern evident clearly in his expression. Sophia took a deep, steadying breath, clearly preparing to share something she had kept hidden for a very long time. "There's a lot you don't know about why I ran," she said softly, glancing nervously toward the ocean once more before meeting his gaze directly, "about what really happened to me, and why the idea of marrying into a world of violence terrified me so completely." Sophia sat quietly for a long moment, gathering her thoughts before continuing. The sound of waves crashing gently against the shore filled the silence between them, offering a strange sense of calm despite the weight of what she was about to share. "Before I tell you everything," she said carefully, "I need you to understand that my fear was never really about you personally, Damien. It was about everything your world represents." Damien nodded slowly, patience evident clearly in his expression. "I understand," he said gently. "Take whatever time you need." Sophia took a steadying breath. "About 4 years ago, before our families even discussed the possibility of our marriage, there was an incident," she began quietly. "My father was negotiating a business matter with a rival family, and things became tense. One evening, I was in a car with my mother, driving home from a family event when another vehicle deliberately ran us off the road." Damien's expression darkened slightly, concern evident clearly in his gaze. "Are you saying you were targeted?" he asked carefully. Sophia nodded, her voice trembling slightly. "It was meant to intimidate my father, to send a message during his negotiations. My mother suffered a concussion, and I was thrown against the door, which is how I got this," she said, gesturing quietly toward her hidden scar. "It took months to heal, and even longer for the fear to fade, if it ever has." Damien felt anger and empathy mixing within him. "I'm deeply sorry that happened to you," he said sincerely. "No one should have to experience that kind of terror simply because of family business dealings." Sophia offered a small, sad smile. "After that, I couldn't separate the idea of your world from the fear and danger I experienced that night," she admitted. "When my parents suggested our marriage as a way to strengthen ties between our families, all I could picture was more danger, more fear, more nights wondering if violence might touch my life again." Damien studied her closely, understanding deepening steadily within him. "That makes complete sense," he said gently. "I wish I had known this before our wedding day. Perhaps I could have addressed your fears directly, rather than leaving you to face them alone." Sophia looked at him carefully, surprised by his genuine empathy rather than frustration or anger. "You're not upset that I left the way I did?" she asked cautiously. Damien shook his head firmly. "I understand now why you felt you had no other choice," he said honestly. "I only wish you had felt comfortable enough to share this with me directly, rather than carrying this burden alone." Sophia considered his words carefully, appreciation evident clearly in her expression. "I didn't know if I could trust you completely back then," she admitted honestly. "Our families arranged everything so quickly, I barely had time to truly know who you were as a person." Damien nodded understandingly. "That's fair," he said sincerely. "Perhaps this conversation is a good place to start correcting that." Over the following hour, they talked more openly than they ever had before their wedding day. Damien sharing more honestly about his own life, his responsibilities, and his genuine desire to build a safer, more transparent world within his own organization. Sophia, in turn, shared more about the quiet life she had built for herself in the coastal town, her small joys working at the cafe, and the peace she had found away from the pressures of her family's world. "This town has given me something I didn't realize I needed," Sophia admitted. "A chance to simply be myself, without constant fear or expectation." Damien studied her carefully, admiration and understanding evident clearly in his expression. "I can see that clearly," he said honestly. "You seem more at peace here than I ever witnessed before." Sophia smiled genuinely for the first time since their conversation began. "Thank you for understanding, Damien," she said softly. "I know this isn't the reunion either of our families probably expected." Damien offered a small, genuine smile in return. "Perhaps it's exactly the reunion we both needed," he said thoughtfully. One built on honesty rather than obligation. As their conversation gradually wound down, Damien found himself reluctant to immediately return to the city, genuinely wanting to understand more about who Sophia had become during her time away. "Would it be all right," he asked carefully, "if I stayed nearby for a few days? Not to pressure you, but simply to continue this conversation properly." Sophia considered his request thoughtfully, surprised by her own willingness to agree. "I think I'd like that," she said honestly, a small, genuine smile forming on her lips. As they sat together quietly, watching the sunset paint gentle colors across the peaceful ocean, neither Damien nor Sophia yet realized clearly that the very family responsible for her accident years earlier had recently resumed activity nearby, their renewed presence threatening to once again disrupt the fragile peace Sophia had worked so hard to build for herself. 4 years earlier, Sophia had been a bright, hopeful young woman studying literature at university, largely sheltered from the more dangerous aspects of her family's business dealings. Her father, Antonio Marchetti, had always been careful to keep Sophia and her mother, Carla, separate from the complicated, often tense negotiations that defined his position within the city's criminal landscape. That particular evening had begun ordinarily enough, a family celebration for Sophia's cousin's engagement, filled with laughter, good food, and the comfortable warmth of extended family gathered together. Sophia and her mother had left the celebration slightly earlier than the rest of the family, planning a quiet drive home together through the city's outskirts. Unbeknownst to Sophia at the time, her father had been engaged in tense negotiations for weeks with a rival family, the Salvatores, regarding territory disputes that had grown increasingly heated. What Sophia hadn't known then was that the Salvatores, frustrated by her father's unwillingness to compromise, had decided to send a clear, intimidating message. As Carla drove carefully along a quiet stretch of road, an unfamiliar vehicle suddenly appeared behind them, its headlights uncomfortably close. Carla, sensing something wrong, attempted to increase her speed slightly, hoping to create distance between their car and the vehicle following closely behind. Instead, the following car accelerated sharply, deliberately clipping their vehicle's rear bumper, sending Carla's car spinning dangerously out of control. Sophia remembered vividly the terrifying, chaotic moments that followed, the screech of tires, her mother's frightened scream, and the sickening impact as their car collided hard against a roadside barrier. She remembered waking briefly amid the wreckage, a pain radiating sharply through her arm, blood trickling steadily from a deep cut along her forearm where shattered glass had torn through her skin. She remembered her mother's frightened voice calling her name repeatedly, relief evident even through pain and confusion when Sophia finally responded weakly. Emergency responders arrived quickly, though the incident left both Sophia and her mother deeply shaken, physically and emotionally. Sophia required stitches and weeks of careful recovery, the physical wound healing steadily over time, leaving behind only the faded scar she now carried permanently along her forearm. The emotional scars, however, proved far more difficult to heal. In the aftermath, her father had been furious, understanding immediately who was responsible, and the clear message being sent. Tensions between the two families escalated sharply following the incident, though ultimately a fragile peace had been carefully negotiated, primarily to avoid further violence and destruction. Sophia, however, had never fully recovered from the psychological impact of that terrifying night. She became increasingly anxious around cars, uncomfortable in unfamiliar vehicles, and deeply fearful of any situation involving tension or conflict between powerful families. The idea of marrying into another prominent family, entering fully into a world defined by similar tensions and potential violence, had triggered overwhelming anxiety and fear she had struggled desperately to manage privately, without fully explaining her reasons to anyone, including her own parents. When her family arranged her marriage to Damien Cross years later, Sophia had initially attempted to accept her situation quietly, understanding the practical necessity behind such arrangements within her family's world. Yet as her wedding day approached, the anxiety and fear she had suppressed for years resurfaced overwhelmingly, culminating finally in her desperate decision to flee rather than face a life she feared would inevitably lead to more danger and trauma. Now, sitting quietly beside Damien on the peaceful coastal bench, having finally shared this deeply personal history, Sophia felt an unexpected sense of relief. Having finally released the painful secret she had carried alone for so long. "Thank you for trusting me with this," Damien said softly, genuine empathy and understanding evident clearly in his expression. "I can only imagine how difficult it's been, carrying this fear alone all these years." Sophia nodded, tears gently forming in her eyes. "It's been incredibly isolating," she admitted honestly. "I've never told anyone the full truth, not even my own parents, fearing they'd feel guilty or responsible." Damien studied her carefully, admiration for her resilience evident clearly in his gaze. "You've shown incredible strength, facing this alone for so long," he said sincerely. "I hope, moving forward, you'll allow me the chance to help you feel safe again." Sophia smiled gently, genuine warmth evident clearly in her expression, despite the emotional weight of their conversation. "I'd like that," she admitted softly, unbeknownst to either of them. However, the Salvatore family, having recently regained strength and influence within the city, had quietly resumed activity nearby, their renewed presence connected directly to ongoing tensions involving territory disputes with Damien's own organization. Neither Sophia nor Damien yet realized clearly that the painful past, connected to Sophia's trauma, was about to resurface once again, threatening the fragile peace and safety they had only just begun rebuilding together. Over the following days, Damien remained in the coastal town, carefully honoring his promise to give Sophia space while gradually rebuilding trust between them. He found himself visiting the small cafe regularly, sometimes simply enjoying quiet conversation during her breaks, other times joining her for peaceful walks along the shoreline after her shifts ended. Sophia found herself gradually more comfortable in his presence, appreciating his patience and genuine effort to understand her perspective rather than pressure her into immediate decisions about their future. "You've been different than I expected," she admitted one afternoon as they walked slowly along the beach together. "Different how?" Damien asked curiously. "More patient," Sophia replied honestly. "More willing to listen, rather than simply expecting things to happen a certain way." Damien considered her words thoughtfully. "I've learned that trust isn't something that can be demanded or rushed," he said sincerely. "Especially after everything you've experienced, I want you to feel genuinely safe, not simply obligated." Sophia smiled softly, appreciation evident clearly in her expression. "That means a lot to me," she said quietly. As their conversations continued deepening, Damien made a point of demonstrating clearly, through both words and actions, that his world could offer genuine safety, rather than the danger and trauma that had shaped Sophia's fears for so long. He shared openly about the careful, deliberate steps he had taken within his own organization to minimize unnecessary conflict, emphasizing his genuine commitment to protecting those he cared about. "I understand your fear wasn't about me specifically," he said one evening, as they sat together watching the sunset. "But I want you to know I take your safety and peace of mind seriously. I don't want you to feel like being with me means constant danger." Sophia studied him carefully, warmth and trust growing steadily within her. "I'm starting to believe that," she admitted honestly. "Being here with you these past few days, it feels different than I expected." Their growing bond, however, was soon tested unexpectedly. One afternoon, while Sophia worked her usual shift at the cafe, she noticed an unfamiliar man sitting quietly near the window, his gaze occasionally drifting toward her with unsettling attentiveness. Something about his presence unsettled her deeply, memories of the accident years earlier flooding uncomfortably back into her mind. She mentioned her unease quietly to Damien later that evening. "There was a man at the cafe today," she said anxiously. "He didn't do anything specific, but something about him made me uneasy." Damien's expression sharpened immediately, concern evident clearly in his tone. "Can you describe him?" he asked carefully. Sophia provided as much detail as she could recall, watching as Damien's expression grew increasingly serious. "I'll have my men look into this immediately," he said firmly, clearly taking her concerns seriously. Damien quickly contacted Marco, his trusted associate, instructing him to investigate discreetly. Within hours, Marco returned with concerning news. "The description matches a known associate of the Salvatore family," Marco reported gravely. "It's possible they've become aware of your presence here, boss, and potentially Sophia's connection to the incident 4 years ago." Damien's jaw tightened, protective instincts flaring instantly. "We need to increase security around Sophia immediately," he instructed firmly. "I won't allow the Salvatores to threaten her again." Sophia, upon hearing this news, felt her earlier anxiety intensify rapidly. "Do you think they know who I am?" she asked nervously. "That they might target me again?" Damien took her hands gently, sincerity and determination clear in his gaze. "I won't let that happen," he reassured her firmly. "Whatever their intentions, I promise you, I'll do everything necessary to keep you safe." Sophia nodded, though clear fear remained evident in her expression. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she admitted quietly. "The danger following me, no matter where I try to go." Damien studied her closely, empathy and determination evident clearly in his gaze. "This time is different, Sophia," he said firmly. "You're not facing this alone anymore. I intend to make sure this threat ends completely, so you never have to live in fear again." As tension mounted steadily in the days that followed, both Damien and Sophia understood clearly that the painful past, connected to her earlier trauma, was resurfacing directly into their present, setting the stage for a decisive confrontation that would finally determine whether Sophia could truly find the safety and peace she had so desperately sought for years. The Salvatore family, led now by Antonio Salvatore's son, Marco Salvatore, had recently sought to reassert influence within territories long contested between their family and both the Marchettis and the Cross organization. Discovering Sophia's location and her growing connection to Damien presented an unexpected opportunity, and Marco Salvatore quickly recognized as valuable leverage against both powerful families simultaneously. "If we can use her against both Cross and her own father," Marco explained coldly during a private meeting with his associates, "we weaken two powerful families at once, forcing concessions on territory disputes that have dragged on for years." His men, though clearly uneasy about directly targeting Sophia given her innocent status, understood the calculated logic behind Marco's ruthless strategy. "How do you intend to proceed?" one associate asked cautiously. "Quietly," Marco replied firmly. "We take her without unnecessary violence, then negotiate carefully from a position of strength." Meanwhile, Damien had significantly increased security around Sophia, positioning discreet protection both at the cafe and throughout the coastal town. Despite these precautions, however, Marco's men proved patient, carefully waiting for an opportunity when Sophia's security might become momentarily vulnerable. That opportunity arose one quiet afternoon when Sophia, needing a brief walk to clear her mind after an emotionally difficult morning, ventured slightly further from the cafe than her security detail had anticipated. Recognizing this brief vulnerability, Marco's men moved swiftly, intercepting her quietly along a secluded stretch of beach before her guards could properly respond. Sophia's initial fear rushed back overwhelmingly, and immediately as she was quickly and forcefully taken into a nearby vehicle, her mind flashing back instantly to the terrifying night of her accident years earlier. Despite her fear, however, she forced herself to remain composed, recognizing clearly the seriousness of her situation. When Damien learned of Sophia's abduction, an intense fury and fear, unlike anything his men had previously witnessed, erupted within him. "How did this happen?" he demanded furiously, though guilt and concern colored his tone deeply. Marco, his trusted associate, quickly reported the details, clearly shaken by the security lapse. "She stepped briefly outside her usual protected area," he explained grimly. "Salvatore's men were clearly waiting patiently for exactly this opportunity." Damien's jaw tightened, determination hardening instantly within him. "Find her immediately," he ordered firmly. "I don't care what resources it takes. We're bringing her home safely now." Damien's men quickly mobilized, tracing Sophia's abduction carefully through witnesses and available security footage, working tirelessly to pinpoint exactly where Marco Salvatore's men had taken her. Meanwhile, held captive within an isolated coastal property, Sophia sat anxiously, her mind racing as she desperately tried to remain calm despite overwhelming fear. Marco Salvatore eventually entered the room, studying her carefully, calculated coldness evident clearly in his expression. "Ms. Marchetti," he said smoothly, "I apologize for the inconvenience, but your connection to both powerful families makes you quite valuable to my current negotiations." Sophia studied him carefully, fear evident clearly beneath her forced composure. "What do you want?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. "Simply leverage," Marco replied coldly. "Territory concessions from both your father and Damien Cross. Your safety depends entirely on how quickly they choose to negotiate." Sophia's fear intensified rapidly, memories of her earlier trauma resurfacing painfully. Meanwhile, back in the coastal town, Damien's men finally identified Marco Salvatore's exact location, a secluded property along the coastline, carefully secured yet vulnerable to a swift, decisive approach. "We move immediately," Damien instructed firmly, his expression resolute despite the clear danger ahead. "I won't allow her to suffer through this trauma again." Damien's forces moved swiftly and decisively under cover of darkness, surrounding the property carefully before launching a coordinated, forceful rescue operation. Brief, intense gunfire erupted as Damien's men quickly overwhelmed Salvatore's guards, moving swiftly toward the room where Sophia was held captive. Damien personally rushed toward her, relief flooding through him instantly upon finding her frightened yet unharmed. "Sophia," he said urgently, quickly freeing her from her restraints. "Are you hurt?" Sophia shook her head, tears of relief and lingering fear streaming down her face. "I'm okay," she whispered shakily. "You came for me. I promised I would," Damien reassured her firmly, gently pulling her into a protective embrace. "I won't let anything happen to you." As they moved quickly toward safety, Marco Salvatore, recognizing his defeat, attempted a desperate escape, only to be swiftly intercepted and captured by Damien's men. His dangerous scheme against Sophia and both families finally coming to its complete and decisive end. Breathing heavily, adrenaline slowly fading, Sophia turned toward Damien, gratitude and relief evident clearly in her tearful expression. "Thank you," she whispered softly, "for finding me, for keeping your promise." Damien held her closely, warmth and relief evident clearly in his own expression. "I'll always protect you, Sophia," he said softly, "no matter what danger arises." As they finally returned safely toward the coastal town, both Damien and Sophia understood clearly that this dangerous ordeal had brought them even closer together, setting the stage for Sophia to finally find genuine closure regarding the trauma that had haunted her for so many years. In the days following Sophia's rescue, Damien worked carefully to ensure Marco Salvatore's defeat became permanent, using the evidence gathered from the failed kidnapping to expose his reckless actions clearly to other powerful families within the city. Facing significant backlash and the loss of crucial alliances, Marco's influence collapsed rapidly, ending the Salvatore family's ability to threaten Sophia or her own family ever again. With the immediate danger fully resolved, Damien focused his attention on helping Sophia address the deeper, lingering trauma that had shaped so much of her fear over the years. He arranged quietly for her to speak with a trusted, compassionate counselor experienced in helping survivors of violence and trauma, understanding clearly that genuine healing required more than simply removing external threats. Sophia approached this process cautiously at first, though she gradually found comfort and clarity through these sessions, finally addressing openly the fear and anxiety she had carried silently for years. Damien remained patient and supportive throughout, never pressuring her, simply offering steady reassurance and genuine care as she worked through her healing process. One quiet afternoon, several weeks after the incident with Marco Salvatore, Sophia sat beside Damien on the same peaceful beach where she had first shared her painful history with him. "I feel lighter somehow," she admitted softly, watching the gentle waves roll steadily onto the shore. "Like I've finally begun releasing a weight I've carried for years." Damien smiled warmly, genuine happiness evident clearly in his expression. "You've shown incredible courage facing this openly," he said sincerely. "I'm proud of the strength you've shown throughout this entire process." Sophia turned to him, gratitude and affection clear in her gaze. "I couldn't have done this without your patience and support," she said honestly. "You've shown me that safety and genuine care can exist even within a complicated, difficult world." Damien took her hand gently, warmth and sincerity evident clearly in his own expression. "Sophia," he began carefully, "I know our relationship began under complicated, difficult circumstances, but these past weeks have shown me clearly how much I've come to care for you, genuinely and completely." Sophia felt her heart swell with genuine happiness, tears of joy forming gently in her eyes. "I feel the same way, Damien," she admitted softly. "I never expected to find genuine safety and love within a world I once feared so deeply." Damien smiled warmly, gently squeezing her hand. "Then let's build something real together," he said sincerely. "Not because our families arranged it, but because we've genuinely chosen each other, freely and honestly." Sophia nodded, happiness and relief evident clearly in her expression. "I'd like that very much," she said softly. In the months that followed, Sophia gradually reconnected with her family, sharing openly for the first time the trauma she had carried silently for years, finding genuine understanding and support from her parents once they finally understood the depth of her earlier fear. She continued working at the small coastal cafe part-time, cherishing the peaceful life she had built, while also beginning to build a new, meaningful life alongside Damien. Their relationship grew steadily, built genuinely upon honesty, patience, and mutual respect rather than obligation or fear. Damien made a point of demonstrating clearly, through consistent actions, that safety and genuine partnership could exist even within their complicated world, gradually helping Sophia release the fear that had defined so much of her life. Reflecting quietly one peaceful evening, watching the sunset together from their favorite spot along the coastline, Sophia considered deeply the remarkable journey that had brought her back to Damien, this time by genuine choice rather than obligation. What had begun as a frightened bride's desperate escape had transformed completely into something Sophia had never imagined possible: genuine healing, authentic love, and the safety she had spent years desperately searching for, finally found in the most unexpected of circumstances.